Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final session of the day and of the conference. Capping everything off, we have a group of fantastic people who, one of them I've worked with before. You may remember her from last year. We have Brittany Reeves of Waddell, HEMA. She's come back to join this panel. We have Shoshanna Shellans and a EMP fighter, and I'll ask her again to remind her what EMP stands for. I know it's not electromagnetic pulse; that's a completely different other thing. And also a championship bowhurt fighter. We have Spencer Waddell, who of the Wandering Sword Project, who has come again another championship bowhurt fighter. He just won, like last weekend, won a championship. So, and he have his partner in crime, Kyle Potts, also of the Wandering Sword Project. All sort of HEMA instructor. Spencer also does Hama, which is the historical African martial arts, and is an SCA fighter. Now, I'm not sure if Kyle, if you're an SCA fighter as well.
Yeah, I'm an SCA knight.
Oh, cool! I didn't. Congratulations, sir. Thank you.
Thanks. That's is what it is. I like it. I like all kinds of sword fighting, but that's where I started.
Well, I think a lot of us started there. So thank you all for joining us. So we're going to talk a little bit about, because we have four of you here who have experience doing drastically different sports, and I imagine that the movement of the armor and what armor you have to use for the rule sets, because each of these have different rule sets with different safety protocols. What it must inform your mindset of how you approach these fights. So, Shoshanna, like I said before, what does EMP stand for? I know it's a fairly similar SCA rule set with Rattan, but you also do more things, like there's grappling and stuff involved, correct?
Right. So EMP stands for the Empire of Medieval Pursuits,
Okay.
and it is also a rattan fighting group, but it is a little bit more of an average between SCA and bowhurt because they do incorporate the punching and grappling, and it's first to 3 hits for win in a match. As opposed to like limb shots or kill shots. So it's anywhere on the body up to 3 hits. So it's like continuous fighting until you take 3 or a substantial.
All right, and that is similar to bowhurt. Now, you've all of you have done some sort of bowhurt, correct? Is that Brittany? I think you're the newest one to the bowhurt crowd in all this, aren't you?
Yeah, I decided I wanted to dabble in some armor stuff recently, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but definitely a lot of differences from what I was used to within doing HEMA for 10 years. So it's a fun crossover, but doing the compare and contrast is quite fun for me.
And so you were doing the HEMA, like the bloss fetching, correct? Bloss fetching. Yeah.
Yeah.
What went through your head that first time you had to put that helmet on?
The first time I put on my helmet was, I don't want to say disappointing, kind of frustrating. So I have it right here. It was this one, which is pretty much like the size of me.
Yeah.
It's like 17 pounds, and I was kind of shocked by it because I've never had to wear like heavy armor before. And the bowhurt helmets that I was kind of familiar with are more overbuilt, in my opinion, than like historical armor pieces. And that's not a criticism. That's just, for the sport itself, it has to be able to take those blows. And I was not really ready for carrying 17 pounds on my head. And it's got like a closed face as well. And so you have a much more narrow field of vision, more restriction for your breathing as compared to something with better airflow, like a fencing mask, for example. So it was different for sure, but I did okay.
And Spencer, doing Hama stuff, not HEMA, Hama.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's also primarily unarmored combat too. And what kind of armor was at the disposal was being used during that time frame in that area of the world?
That's the craziest thing. Like, as we know, Africa's a giant continent. So
Yeah,
there
exactly.
were parts up in the Horn where they'd actually have some chain armor as well with a little bit of plates. But predominantly, when we're doing a lot of it in the United States or a lot of practitioners, it's a cloth quilted like gambesson. So it's more like HEMA. So we're doing more of the tag, the point scoring. We're also just doing like, okay, don't clobber me, but how would you hit? Like, still, I mean, I'm always going to preach the Shotel if you ever ask me about anything Hama, because I love its curviness. I don't have one with me right now. But when we were doing like the little pokes and strikes, it's like, okay, you got me with that. That's good. So mostly we're doing more like HEMA training wise.
Okay. Damon Stith was part of the uh, panel, was part of it. Did a talk last year for Art of the Sword, and did talk a bit about the swords they use. He didn't really get into the armor, so but yeah, we did discuss how Africa. We say, well, what armor did they use in Africa? It's like, well, I mean, where?
Which part?
Somewhere and when.
It's like saying, it's like, well, what armor did they wear in Russia in the 14th century? It's like,
Like what part? What time? But it's really interesting. And Damon Stith being awesome and totally my mentor. He can just go on for hours where I'm like, what about the Epsilon axe in Egypt opposed to the Kopesh when they had less? It's just so many different types of armaments. But like Brittany was saying, it's different with some of them overbuilt. My HEMA helmet is really big too. In this last competition, it's kind of bulbous, but it protects me from getting hurt too well. And people are like, oh, that's easy to hit. I'm like, not if you use a proper guard to block your vectors, but it's fun. It's fun.
I will admit I was one of those people when I first, because I used to SCA fight. I've retired from SCA fighting because I can't get hit in the head anymore. Basically, I wasn't a good SCA fighter. But I was scrappy. I knew how to take a hit and I would get back up and keep going. But yeah, and I also had the misconception going into the SCA fighting where when I was younger, I see SCA fighting. It's like, oh, they're just hitting each other with sticks. I could do that. I could do that. I could hit this guy easily. And I'm like, no. It's like, if you know the systems, the different systems, you all know how to fight. I mean, it's not just whacking each other with sticks. It is its own martial art and martial fighting. Yeah, Kyle. Kyle, you said, and I know Spencer's also an SCA knight, correct? Yeah. So Kyle, do you ever use HEMA training or in SCA fighting, or is it just the systems don't mesh?
So that's a real interesting question, because some of it works great and some of it doesn't. And the thing that most people, when you jump into a new sword fighting sport, you think what's going to work for you 90% of the time in the other sport is going to work over here, and it doesn't. But that doesn't mean that it works. It just means like your absolute best moves or most common moves here might not translate to be the most common moves under this other rule set. And that's one of the huge things with like the 133 Sword and Buckler manual was when I first started. I was like, this is really cool. This looks a lot like that one Duke that I know who's really good and does all that weird stuff. I bet I could do that. And it helped me learn Duke Stephen Beckenham style, is going through that and going, oh, I've had someone do that weird roll to fifth ward and then stab me somehow from that sword behind the back, roll it up position. And I was able to start picking up some of this interesting stuff and practice it. But then, and you take some of these same moves and you go over to like when I have done a little bit of Bohurt. I've done some practices. I haven't gone to any tournaments or anything, but I've gone over there and been like, okay, my SCA has prepared me for a lot of this, but it's still totally different. It's a totally different game. Anything that sets up for a thrust, it's now no longer any good. If I take that same, this might set up for a thrust move to HEMA, it works great. And so now you have to think totally different. You have to kind of make these little containers of what's going to work and what's not for each sport. If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. You can sort of compartmentalize it of the skill sets. Shoshanna, you probably, because the similarities of the rule sets, do you find that you have to separate them less, the EMP and the Bohurt less?
The small differences in the rule sets actually account for a big difference in the strategy. And so Kyle was just talking about, thrusts. Thrusts are allowed in EMP. And so that was a thing that startled me during the fights, because I actually started in Beaufort and then I went to Rattan. So I went the opposite direction. And thrusts and wraps were the ones that got me really good in the rattan sports and in EMP. And I actually managed to make it to a couple SCA practices now in the past month. And so the precision in SCA is so amazing because you've got that one shot, that one kill shot. You got to be really precise, and they're amazing blockers. Like in Beaufort, you'll find the duelists aren't focusing as much on blocking as maybe the rattan folk because you have a limited number of points to go up to other than buckler, but that's another thing. So going from Beaufort over to the rattan sports has been an awesome adventure too.
You feel that you have to hold yourself back when you get into the rattan sports?
Hold back? Oh no. I have gotten such hard fights in both, and for sometimes different reasons. I have been so appreciative of what I've learned in EMP and have been able to take back into Beaufort some of the moves that they have that I wasn't, privy to when I was just doing the steel. It's just expanded my horizons in another cool way. Like I really love like this conversation altogether. I haven't heard about Hama before other than Spencer's awesome page, and I'd love to learn more about that. And the more we all cross over, the broader our perspectives are going to be in sword fighting in general, and we're going to be able to get the, universal language throughout.
Brittany, when you're fighting, you practice a lot. I follow you. I follow your social media pages, so I know that you are like a machine. You're always practicing. Do you ever? How do you switch gears between the HEMA and the Beaufort when you're training? What clicks it for you that you're or is it just come naturally?
Yeah, so I had to adjust. Obviously, you guys have already talked about like the thrust issue, where I can't take some of what I do in HEMA and translate it over to Beaufort. And then what I do in Beaufort, there's some things that, I can't really translate over to HEMA. It's not really like polite to punch somebody in HEMA fencing. But, there are things like that. In terms of training, I really don't treat it any differently, mostly because it still requires a lot of the same kind of skills. However, I've not, I've been very grateful, as Shoshanna was saying, to do cross training. And so I've picked up jujitsu as well. And just putting it all together has been really, really eye-opening for so many different reasons. And then when I'm training and I go from one to the other, whether I'm wearing, a brig or I'm wearing a, fencing gambeson or a gi, I still have to get into the same kind of mindset. And that doesn't really change too much across the board. It's more just, am I being respectful of the rules in place for each thing that I'm doing?
Have any of you ever been fighting in a different style and done a move where it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that.
Oh yeah, totally. I've definitely accidentally stabbed people in Beaufort and been reprimanded for it. So I get it.
Accidentally.
No, totally accidentally. It was something I struggled with when I first started, because the way that I train with sharps when I'm doing cutting, like competitive cutting with tatami, your point has to come through the cut. You can't keep the point trailing behind. So I carried that into Beaufort for the first couple of like sparring matches that I had, and I'm throwing my point through the cut, and people would kind of step into my measure because their training style is different. Like when you're doing continuous sparring, it's okay to like take a hit in order to get a bigger hit on the other person, and that's valid in those rules. Whereas, with HEMA, you don't have that kind of trade-off. So there was a few times I would be cutting, throwing my point out with good cutting technique, and people walk into it and it gets stuck in a piece of their armor, and it's like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, I didn't mean to do that. but I've gotten a lot better about it now. And then I don't think I stabbed anybody at nationals in October, so that was a win for me.
She did not.
She didn't.
Yeah.
Speaking about wins, like I said, I know Spencer just won a championship title, but Shoshanna, I saw that picture. You had some medals on you too.
Oh yeah, Spencer and I took home some dueling slots. So I'll be doing Sword and Shield, and Spencer's got Long Sword for Battle of the Nations.
And
But
where's
she's
that
being
picture?
humble. She also won Sword and Shield and Buckler, but she's choosing Sword and Shield.
And where is that taking place this year? Is that back in Poland or is it?
So Battle of the Nations 2022 is supposed to take place in Romania, where we're going to meet Dracula and go to Transylvania.
Got my garlic ready, my steaks, silver. Yeah.
Are you going after him? Are you? Oh wait, no, that's right. That's right. The your superhero that you've been assigned is Blade. I know that. I do know that.
You
So
did the research. You're right.
in the SCA in the East Kingdom, there's and I know you're not in the East, but you are beloved by a lot of people in the East. And there's a tradition of once you're knighted, you are also given a superhero persona, and they have dubbed Spencer Blade, so that's his.
So
he's going after Dracula.
it's gonna be perfect. But I think we'll leave him alone. He's gonna have to come after us. Plus, I'm gonna go to bed on time because we got to fight in the tournament. Got to
You're gonna be too busy. You're gonna be too busy winning. So that's.
Hopefully. And then honestly, Shoshanna's inspired me as well. She wants to win the IMCF tournament as well in April, and I want to do the same. So hopefully we'll go to Nashville and try to get both spots so we can be like undisputed champions.
Undisputed champions. I'll
We'll
keep my
take a big adventure together to Romania and Finland, and
now
have a big sword fighting.
The IMCF and the HMB. Well, so I'll admit I get mixed up with because there was like the big one, and then there wasn't the big one. They split, and then there's a third one now, and they've all got different names and titles. But you all kind of played together, and it's all the same crowds of people sort of roll together, right?
I think the latest split is to thank for the unification of Buhurt right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So two main splits. First split caused a separation, oil and water, between the IMCF folk and HMB. And the second split within the United States has kind of just made everybody say, we'll just fight wherever. And now the qualifiers, at least for IMCF, are an open tournament. So you don't have to be a member of any particular league to do it. And so this latest split, I think, was kind of a good thing for bringing the whole community together. And
they all use the very basically the same rule set, right?
Basically, there's just some minor things between HMB and IMCF that aren't all that big of a deal. Except for the rope and polearm. Fights, right? You'll hear the polearm guys talk about the rope.
Speaking of polearms, Brittany, I've seen you with that axe. I've seen pictures of you with that axe.
Yes. What of it?
I think you like the axe, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of polearms. That's actually the reason why I decided I wanted to cross over into Buhurt, because the applications of polearms within HEMA, even though we have a huge amount of source material for polearms duels, it's really difficult to implement it on a sparring level and really like test your theories with pressure without hurting somebody. Like, our Blossfectin gear is not built to take polearms at all. Like, it's just not. You can't, even the rubber trainers, you can't swing on a fencing mask. And if you do, you have to be very controlled. And, I've tried sparring with it, and you can do it with the right person. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's no way to really have a safe, like, polearms tournament within HEMA if you're not having armor. And that's where the harness fectin side of HEMA comes in. But in terms of like your very standard, more popular Blossfectin, there's really not a place to do polearms in earnest. And so I was looking at the Buhurt group that I lease my studio to, and they're like, we got polearms and we got armor. And I'm like, okay, let's let's do this. And it was finally an opportunity for me to be able to really test my theories on it and try it out in earnest, which was the most exciting thing in the world. So I really like having both worlds.
The hardest hit I ever took anywhere was with it was an SCA hit, but it was one of those rubber hammer, like almost solid rubber hammer heads, and it was on a 5-foot pole, and I think that might have been the hit where I standing there and I'm like, I can't do this, I can't, and I'm wearing this when I fight. So, and it's not a light helmet in itself. I was told it actually I probably could wear it for a Boohurt if I wanted to, because it's that beefy. But I just walked away from that and I was like, nope, I can't. It's like, you guys, if you guys are hitting, this isn't rubber that you guys are hitting with. You guys are hitting with steel axe heads. So that must rock you. Have you ever really been rocked yet?
Yeah. Are you talking to me?
No, any of you. Anybody can answer. If anybody.
Oh, yeah, I totally have. I did pole arms at nationals in October, and that was an awesome experience. I really enjoyed it. I wish that I actually only did the pole arms, because I did a bunch of other stuff and I just gassed myself out wearing armor, because that's the one thing that I don't think Blossfectin HEMA really appreciates about the Boohurt community, is just how much strength and stamina and just sheer willpower it takes to just stand there in armor waiting for your turn to fight, let alone even fighting. Just the standing there part is exhausting. But yeah, I've been knocked out cold with a pole arm before, like hit in the head, lights out, dropped like a sack of potatoes.
You're right about the waiting can be. There is an event in the East Kingdom called Burka, Market Day at Burka. And Market Day at Burka usually happens the last weekend in January in New Hampshire. So it's cold. So it takes place in a hotel, basically. What they do is they clear out the hotel ballroom. And it is a meat grinder where they set up like pits, basically, where you go and you get in line and you walk and you get into the pit and you fight. And the person who wins the fight stays in the pit. So if you lose, you're out and you're back in line. And it's just a constant 3.5 hours of going through. And yeah, literally, I was more tired from standing in line, shuffling forward to fight, than it would be to to actually when I was fighting. So.
Oh yeah, Matt, what you just described was a huge thing that we would do in my practice when I used to run my practices back in Indiana. We would do that for 2 hours every week. And then we called it the pit. And it was like our best training tool was learn how to wear the armor. That was like the biggest thing you have to learn. If you want to fight in armor, you've got to put the armor on and just do that marathon. We did it every week.
Learning, yeah, and just putting it on. I mean, that's learning how to move and breathe in armor, because everyone talks about the helmet and they're like, I can't breathe in the helmet. I never had a problem in any of my helmets. And my SCA career, when I fought, I said, I want full face helmets. I don't want the bar grill. I want the real helmets. I never had a problem with the helmets. It was the breast being strapped into the breastplate that I would get done fighting and I'd be like, they're like, get your helmet off. And I'd be like, no, get the breastplate off, because it's like, I can't. So the amount of armor you all wear when you do all this stuff, you must have. Are you all sort of your teammates helping you get dressed, or do you have specific people that help you, or do you get dressed yourself? I can't. It depends. I can't get into my armor myself, so I'm jealous if you can all put on your armor all by yourself.
We're all adults that are capable of dressing ourselves, except in this case. I still need help getting the brig on. I have to there's straps in the back that I have to do, and you have to get your Simon strap, which is the leather strap in the back that prevents the helmet from getting ripped off. You can't do that yourself, So I still need help. I'm sure there's some really awesome people who don't need help, but I still need help getting dressed in the morning for armor.
It's a legitimate bragging point if you can get all your armor on yourself, because that means everything's strapped right and the buckles are in the right places and everything. But my Visby has the buckles in the back. There's no way I can do that myself. Most armor people need to help each other out, definitely.
My brig I can get on all myself. Yeah, I can, but it's like, could you help? So I have these little T-Rex arms and you're trying to get this and talk about armor. If you have everything on right, it takes so much energy to be like doing this one. You're like, hey, could you just help me instead? Opposed to when I get out there and I want to swing my longsword, you're like, I'm so tired because you're trying to get it all together.
Yeah.
We've definitely done the buddy system before, Spencer and I. Like, okay, I've got my breastplate on. Thank you for that. Now you turn around and I'll buckle you up.
Also, getting each other into armor, I think, is just a wonderful team building exercise. You know, like the monkeys that groom each other.
There's a word for that. There's a word for that. I learned this a few years ago. It's called poosking. So you guys poosk each other in armor.
Yeah, so
Can we
when
say that on TV?
someone is working on my tie, this calm washes over me because I get this, you know, sense of kinship and community, and it's a very relaxing thing.
It's so funny because you're right. There's the bond with your friends, like we're all here to do this together, and then we go into the ring and we're like, all right, I'm going to inflict as much violence as I possibly can on you, and you're going to do it back to me, and then let's go right back to being buddies afterwards.
I think that's probably why we have one of the friendliest communities, is because we have a direct way to get out any aggression.
Yep. If you do something really that way, you're like, oh, this could come back to me and I could reap what I sowed real quickly.
So, Kyle and Spencer, how did you get started, and how did you get started in this really cool project that you guys have, the Wandering Sword project?
So during COVID, honestly, we had this one moment where a friend was trying to put together like a backyard pool and there's a whole bunch of rocks. So it was literally like this anime moment. We're like, hey, want to come move some rocks and get paid? And I'm like, let's go do that and get to the gym and we get to do that. And then I was talking to Kyle. I'm like, you know what? We should create something like the Jeet Kune Do of swords, or let's just spread swordsmanship all across the world. And I don't care if it's lightsabers, Hama, Hema, foam, Bohurt, Hema. Like, let's just do it.
Yeah, at the time, it was my first time seeing Spencer when I got back from Thailand and China. I did kind of this world tour and I trained a lot of martial arts in these different countries. And it was my first time like seeing him and I'm like, oh man, you wouldn't believe this crazy sword thing I learned in Thailand. And then like there were these deaf monks at this China temple and I fought one of them with a spear and he was like, what? This sounds made up. And I'm like, but it's really not. Like they thought I was a British guy and like we had to use sign language to communicate. And it was like a 500-year-old temple that used to, or fortress that used to protect against Japanese pirates. Like it was crazy. And like, we're talking about this stuff and we're like, and I'm like, here's some of the stuff that like super worked, like our SCA spear fighting, 10 out of 10. Like that's some legit type of fighting with the point on. Here's some of my SCA stuff that like in Thailand, they hit me in the elbow and the hand like a million times and it didn't work how I thought it would. And we had this like exchange and we're like, okay, let's talk about that. Let's travel. And of course we're like, just as soon as COVID eases up, we're going to travel to these locations and do some stuff on it. And we're still waiting for that, but we haven't stopped. We're still going to practice, talk with everyone that does swords, teach people, and like, just like kind of learn all of it. We want everyone to learn about every bit of it. And that's our whole mission that we're borderline obsessed with.
But it was cool even during the COVID hit and it stopped a lot of our plans. That's when I started focusing on training myself. And I was like, well, now it's time to go out. And I've always wanted to do steel because I love the way steel hits. Not that I don't like rattan, but a steel sword actually hitting someone with steel, it just feels so much, it feels beautiful. And then I'd stalk people like Shoshanna and Brittany. I'd see their amazing Instagrams and I'd be like, oh, they're so cool. I want to do these things. So hopefully I can maybe meet them. And here we are 2 years later. And now we have the Wandering Sword Project. And so non-for-profit, where it's just all about teaching swords to everybody. And we actually have a camp coming up in the winter or in the summer called Camp Wakanda, where I'll be teaching more Hama things. And now I can say like, yeah, exactly, Wakanda forever. So we'll be teaching that in Peoria, Illinois. We'll teach them historical African martial arts, as well as getting them into some Hema as well, and break down those divides. Because I've done martial arts since I was 8, and so many people are like, my Kung Fu is better than your Kung Fu. I'm like, they're all really similar, and the body can move so many certain ways. Yeah.
We'll have to try to get you guys up to do something in Maine, because how'd you guys like to do a sword fight on the rocky coast with like waves crashing in a lighthouse, or I know a mountain with a tower on top?
See,
Yes,
all of
please.
this.
Sign me up.
Yes to all of
Yeah,
this.
well, can we get Shoshanna and Brittany too?
Yeah, only if Shoshanna and Brittany can come. Like they've got to be invited
Yay.
too.
Definitely, we can make this happen. We can make this happen.
Yes.
So you are four, and you're not competitive people at all. No.
Friendly competitive, yes.
He's like, I'll show you how competitive I am. Does getting like geared up in the different, like, I mean, so in the fighting in the SCA, and I'm not sure if EMP is the same way, but you need less armor basically. I mean, the SCA minimums are you need like your joints covered, your neck and spine covered, the head covered, and your kidney protection. But other than that, I mean, there was a Greek guy that went running out there in basically a loincloth, didn't he? Yeah, at Penzik, right? Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, there's the gladiator guy.
yeah, the gladiator. So does putting on the armor change your level of competitiveness, or does it matter more of like what the event is in itself?
That's a good point. For me, I've had basically two sets of armor that I alternate between. I had the armor that when I wanted to be knighted, as you know, as an SCA practitioner, it's difficult. You know, it takes a lot of time. You have to go to a lot of things, and then you have to do well. When I was doing that, I was in that mindset of like, all right, this weekend I'm going to go here. Here's the people that I'm going to try my best to beat up, and I'm going to try to optimize all my gear to where that's what I'm doing that week. And so I had the set of armor I used then, like my unbelted champion armor. And then I have the set of armor I use now. I've been a knight for 8, 9, 10 years. Oh my God, 10 years. Holy crap, it's 2022. So I've been a knight for 10 years. I have the armor I wear now that's like 14th century. It's a lot of plate, way above the minimums, because I like it. I like to put on all of that armor and fight. And I don't really care about winning the way that I did 10 years ago. For me, it's more about going and competing with my friends to improve, but I don't feel like I have to prove anything to anybody. And as a result, that kit is way less competitive. If I wanted to, like, if you told me right now, said, Kyle, you have to go to this tournament and you have to win, I wouldn't wear my 14th century kit for that rule set, for the SCA rule set. I would wear the one that is the most effective in that environment by the rules, which are just two different mindsets.
Yeah, I was a person who, this is newer stuff for me, but my first full SCA armor was, I was actually, I can hold on a second. No.
Oh,
Go
here
back to
we
the weigh
go.
machine, pull it up.
This is going to be the like Freon cans that everyone talks about.
No. How basic do you think I am?
He's a man of class.
Hold on a second. So that was my first full set of SCA armor.
That's pretty darn good.
That's pretty cool.
I actually miss it. I was talking about how I miss it a lot, and I remember, people would come to me and be like, "Well, you'll never win anything wearing that," and like they were right. But at the same time, it's like that wasn't my goal. I wanted to wear armor. I wanted to
Yes.
feel what it was to be a knight, and not SCA knight,
A historical knight.
Historical knights, everybody.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, wearing that stuff, and like you said, wearing the full 14th century, it is harder to be quote unquote competitive, and you need that other something more than just the competitive drive to wear stuff like that. I'm sure that changes when you get into like Bowhurt and things like that, because you need to wear the bulkier, more protective armor.
You want to go, Shoshanna? I see you thinking.
Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking about, how the mindset changes from before you're putting on your armor to putting on your armor to fighting in your armor. And I find that was a lot more drastic of a difference when I was first starting. When I was first starting Bowhurt, putting on armor was an association with the seriousness of the event and the anxiety of competing. And it was a relief when that went away, because I had worn my armor enough in practice, I had worn it enough in competition, that putting on my armor was familiar, And when that, like, when putting on my armor no longer made a difference, you know, that was the best thing for me, because I put it on and it's like, all right, this is my work clothes, you know, let's do this, it's showtime. And you know, putting down the visor, I think is the little fun difference for me. Like when the visor goes down, then like I get excited, like ready to
I
go
love the
in.
sound it makes. I love the sound when you have it up and you just go, you're like, okay, let's go, and you're like, chunk, and it
Yeah.
makes that crunching, that metal on metal shunk, and it's like that noise is like, yep, let's do this.
So I have a clap visor, and when it goes down, it goes a bit dark, and that's when I kind of get to be alone with all the training I had leading up to that point. And the way I work out of being anxious for events is having done the preparation. Because if I get to be alone with my training in there and I did enough training, I feel good. If I was alone in there and I didn't prepare for that event, and like that's when probably bad things would start building. And so when the visor goes down, you get to meet, you know, have a little meeting with yourself. Did I prepare? And if the answer is good, then you're ready to go, and it's an awesome feeling.
I noticed whenever I used to put the visor down how more cognizant I became of my breathing, because you can actually hear yourself breathe now. We don't think about hearing ourselves breathe that often, but when you get, you know, enclosed in that, suddenly you can hear the, you know, the sound of your own breathing. And it helped me. Listening to myself breathe used to help me to remember to breathe, because that is something that took me a long time to get past. Is I'd get into something and all of a sudden I'd notice, you know, it's like, oh, I'm getting gassed really quick. It's because I wasn't breathing right, and having that focus of the breathing, like you said, it pulls you out enough to start thinking about things.
It makes a big difference.
Sorry.
Oh, go, you first. You first.
You first.
No, you.
The breathing. I've been doing the steel fighting for 5 years, and that was one of the first lessons I've learned, and I still have to consciously remind myself to breathe sometimes. Sometimes you even need to reteach yourself. It's something it's easy to forget when you're against a really strong opponent.
And it's really, what I was gonna say is there's some friends that I know that do kickboxing or MMA, and they're starting to reach out and they're like, this is all choreographed, right? I'm like, no, it's just different than when you have no armor on, the movements and how much we train. And I put one of my friends in, it's like, he's an MMA guy, really good shape. And now I start swinging his halberd, and he started doing like baseball swings, and I'd wait till he moved the baseball swings and then like smack him on the butt. And he's like, well, like, how did, and it's like the timing, how do you get used to this? I'm like, how are you hitting me each time? I'm like, because you're telegraphing, because it's different when you have the armor on, and you have to practice. And that just makes it so much fun. And I think that goes into mindsets, right? Like me, when I'm doing an SCA fight, it's tag. It's like a taekwondo point scoring. I can't get hit first, right? So now it's like kind of like a lightsaber. So I have to block everything. I have to be there. When I'm doing bow hurt, it's boxing. They can hit me once, but as long as I block and I get more and more hits on them, we keep on going. And I actually used to train a lot of boxing when I started to work on my next levels in SCA, because it's different when you get punched in the face in boxing. You can't just be like, cool, that's it. You have to block and get out of it and keep on going. It's just so exhilarating.
If you're boxing somebody and they say, cool, that's it, that's your, stop boxing them, because something's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But it's different. It's different.
Brittany, when is there a difference when you, I mean, I'm sure there's a difference between the training for the cutting, like when you're doing your stances and things like that, do you find you have to adjust the way you're standing and moving as opposed from cutting to HEMA to Bohurt stuff?
Not really, actually. I tried to not change it too much as I moved through different systems. So the way that I fight in HEMA and the way that I had attempted to fight doing Bohurt and the way that I do my cutting, I really don't do it all that differently, other than like the physical things that force a certain constraint. So like when I fight in armor, I still don't have full armor for myself. I'm borrowing kit from another guy, and his kit doesn't really, it's not made for me, right? So there's some restrictions and things that I have to change. And there's maybe some, really technical hand grips that I can do with HEMA that I can't do in Bohurt, because the gauntlets don't really allow that kind of movement. But in terms of just like how the body moves, my forms and function. I try not to change that too much, because I think Spencer had already touched on this, is that there's only so many ways the body can move, right? There's only so many ways that we can, transfer this kinetic energy. And I don't really want it to be super different. The way that I cut should be the way that I fence, which should still be the way that I move in armor. And I've tried to keep it very coherent, cohesive as I go.
Shoshanna, so I'm assuming that the EMP, much like the SCA, they don't separate the fighters like the Bohurt does, right? And the Bohurt, you have like the men's league and the women's league, correct?
Correct. They're calling it the Open League. And
the Open League.
In Buchert, and then in EMP, SCA, there's no differentiation from what I understand. Yeah.
So so do you find it you have to change anything in your mindset when you're fighting men in EMP as opposed to what you're normally doing like Bohurt, or is it just you go out and fight and kick everybody's butt?
No, I do have to change my mindset when fighting men. I actually, a lot of times, have to change my style a bit, and I prepare myself for a different pace. I've also fought men in the open division in Buchert for Sword and Shield in the ACW, and it's a bit different. I do have inhibitions about fighting men, but the men in this community are wonderful. And so like going in and fighting with them has been a really good exercise. Some of the things in style that have to change, I normally have a pretty hips back, lean forward style. If I'm fighting somebody that's much bigger than me, I can get into big trouble. I was taught that lesson by Anton Zemlok III, and he practically crammed me into the dirt. Thankfully, that was during seating. The next day I adjusted a more upright posture, and I survived a lot better. And so I think my experience has broadened a lot by fighting against both men and women. They are slightly different fights.
So this is an open question for anybody. Is there any system that you haven't tried yet that you'd really like to try? Anything in armor you haven't done yet you'd like to try?
I want to try Hama.
My first thought was actually Hama too, but for like that very particular, they have this stick fighting. Spencer, you sent me a video of this a while ago. It was like they have these 5-foot long sticks and they only have like ropes on their hands as protection. Yes, it looks awesome and dangerous and like rope armor only. And I saw it and I'm like, I can do that. I think that'd be fun.
Brittany, anything you haven't tried yet you'd like to in armor that you give it a try?
Oh, gosh, yeah, there's a lot. My problem is like I already do so much and I don't really have the time. But I would love to get into basically anything sword related. And this is not really related to armor stuff at all, but like lightsaber, get me into lightsaber. Let me do it. Give me the glow stick. I'm ready. Like, but anything. Like I've wanted to do kickboxing for a long time. I've never done it. Again, not really related to armor, but like I watch like these really high level Buchert fighters and they're doing these crazy, like awesome kicks, like in armor. And I'm so impressed with just their ability to do that. And I'm like, man, I want to do that. I want to like roundhouse kick somebody and knock them out, but wearing armor. That's got to be the most powerful feeling in the world. Is like, I've got these gauntlets, these fists of steel, and like this 5-foot pole weapon, but I'm just gonna kick you. Like that's got to be the most powerful feeling in the world. And Brittany, that's what I want to do. I just want to kick someone.
Have you? Sorry, Brittany, I've got to ask this. Have you seen that video of John Wayne Parr in Australia when he goes to the Bohurt practice?
No.
Okay, I'll have to send this to you. So John Wayne, I'm a huge Muay Thai fan. I've done Muay Thai for 4 years now. He's like a big hero in the Muay Thai community because he was this Australian that went to Thailand and was like the first outsider that did well. He, like within the last month, he went to a Bohurt practice and put on armor and had to get stitches afterwards. And he had an axe fight.
What?
It's the coolest thing I've ever seen, because you can tell he's A+ at his thing, but this is just like Spencer was saying, like it's a new game, but he throws the axe down after a minute and just throws elbows. It's beautiful. Like it's just he's just a roughhouser. It's wonderful. Anyway, I'll send that to you. I think you'll like it.
I mean, I love it. I think that's what was so exciting for me about Boo Hurt, is not just my ability to do things that I can't do in HEMA, but it's like, I feel impenetrable. You know, like obviously like there's injuries and stuff, but for the most part, you can take a pretty good hit. And I'm like, just give me the extra violence. You know, I just want to try that out. And like with HEMA, it's a little bit different because we're trying to simulate Blossfectin and we have just such thin gambesons, we're still using steel swords. So our level of risk is very high. So we have to actually fence with quite a bit of control. And it's nice to once in a while get in armor and let loose. And again, not recklessly and irresponsibly, right? You don't intend to murder somebody, but there's just a level of intensity that you can get with Boo Hurt that you have to be really careful about trying to implement in HEMA if you're not able to do that with somebody that you trust, you know? So that's what I really like. So yeah, if you got videos with lots of violence, give them to me. I'm ready.
Talk about the lightsaber thing. Years and years ago, when I was just out of high school, I was part of a stage combat troop, a Renaissance Fair armored stage combat troop. And a friend of mine who was part of it, we actually reverse engineered the lightsaber duel of Obi-Wan and Darth Maul from episode 1.
Yes.
And we used to do that as part of the show. We would go through it, but it wasn't quite long enough for what we did, so we would go through it once forwards, and then we would do it backwards. So we actually figured out how to do it backwards.
That's so cool.
That was a lot of fun. It's been years since I've done that. It might still be somewhere deep buried deep. So what about you, Spencer? What's something that you haven't done in armor that you'd like to try?
I just want to do more Boo Hurt with just duels. Like it's so interesting when I go and fight. Like I train myself mainly in people. I live in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. I live in Springfield, Illinois now. So people are like, "What teams do you fight with?" I'm like, "Me, myself, and I, and the gym." And they're like, "Well, that works for you." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'd like to practice something." So like Brittany is talking about, when I went to Sports Legion Fest in AC, it was ACS, so Armored Combat Sports in Reno. They were doing duels, but this time it's more about ICF. I think it's ICF rules, but you can kick and you can punch, but you don't get points for that. So I was fighting my friend Boris Truman. It was awesome. He got up real close and I did a Sparta kick right to his chest, kicked him into the back rail. You hear them go, and I'm like, ooh, he's having trouble breathing. It sounds horrible, but you're like, he had trouble breathing right there. And so I hit him a lot more, and then I knocked him to the side. And people were like, that was so brutal. I'm like, but there was an opening. And afterwards, we hug it out. But that's the part where kicking and punching and throwing elbows, it's really fun.
So
That's not in the main rules.
None of you said jousting, though. Is it because you've tried jousting, or you just don't want anything to do with horses?
I've done
Actually,
some jousting.
I was learning jousting last summer.
Nice.
It was really cool. And I did mounted combat while I was at it. Also really cool.
Cool.
But, really eye-opening. Sword fighting is way less relevant than horsemanship skill.
Yes.
It was like, I don't want to say embarrassing, but like I had like my armor on, and I consider myself a strong sword fighter. And I fought this guy that was like, so like at first he's like, so I can swing the sword like this, right? But he was an outstanding horseman, and he just killed me 500 times, and there was nothing I could do. It was hilarious, honestly.
Kent in the chat wanted to know asks if your Boo Hurt armor fits snugly like the medieval Gothic suits, or is it all more heavily padded than it was 500 years ago?
Mine's snug.
My dueling armor is also snug. Not much padding except for the padded material I wear underneath.
Mine doesn't fit snugly.
That's because it's loner.
Because I'm borrowing like Matt Aaron's kit, and we're a similar height, but he's, much bigger than me as a person. And so that was really a struggle for me. Was we had to find creative ways to pad out the armor, sometimes in some places like 3 or 4 inches, to try and just make it fit, because it was really tough. And obviously that's not the way it is for most people in Boohurt who finally do get their kit. It shouldn't be like that. But like the helmet that I showed earlier, which I have still right here, is so big. I've got a good 4 inches of padding in it on the inside. So like it's bomb proof and I could do anything in it and I won't feel anything. But yeah, I don't have the luxury of armor fitting me well yet. Not yet. Not yet.
But that's a cool experiment in what if you think there's someone that had the choice of armor or no armor, you better believe they're going to take the armor and try to make it work. So that's really cool.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you hear like historically about like heirloom pieces or like armor pieces that get handed down. It's like, well, what if it doesn't fit? There's certain like blacksmithing things that you can do to try and rework that armor. But of course, like what's cheaper than that? Well, you pad it out.
So
pad it out, you know.
We have time for one last question. This is a question for all four of you. You can take turns. The most important question of the conference. So, Shoshanna Shellans, Spencer Waddell, Kyle Potts, Brittany Reeves, what is your favorite armor?
I'll start. My favorite armor is my dueling kit by far. I can do all of the movements in it, and it feels like soft kit. It's from Gudfrun, the arms and legs. The only piece of titanium I wear is my chest, and that's from Armor Moscovia. And then my other piece is Pavel Berlikov, and then my helmet is Jacek Matera. It's only like 8 pounds. And so my dueling kit is nice and strong, nice and light, and my favorite thing, it's late 14th German.
Nice. Spencer, you're up.
Oh, I'm gonna be like Alan and be like, there's no good answer. I love it all. Any armor that I'm wearing, be it my samurai kit that I love near and dear, which is an awesome samurai kit that's more after 15th century, kind of like Tom Cruise, Think Last Samurai, one of my favorite kits. My Bowhurt armor, which is Armor Muscovia as well. Titanium, fits like a glove. Everyone's always like, looks so heavy. I'm like, it's not. I could run around and be bulletproof. But I got one other kit that I want to get is more of a hoplite kit. So I can go and hang out with Christian Cameron when he does a lot of the Iliad things, as well as my Viking kit that I like to do with Raymond Rowe, who WWE tag team wrestler that does Yamsborg. So really, I love it all. More kits, please.
I'll get you hooked up with an Agincourt era archer kit. You can come up and we can shoot arrows at things.
Yes, please. I love archery.
Kyle.
That's a real tough one. Of armors that I've owned and that I've used, probably my current 14th century armor. I've always been fascinated by the Black Prince, and I've always wanted to make like Black Prince relevant armor, to chevaucher across France and be a total knightly jerk. That's always been cool to me. And then I'm like, well, you got to have black, you got to have brass. But of armors that I don't own, basically anything Ugo Serrano has ever made. I'm a huge fanboy. I just follow everything he posts, and I'm like,
oh, you missed. He did a talk a couple hours ago.
I saw that.
Oh, you did saw that. Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. And Brittany, your turn.
Yeah. So I'm gonna not have any special armor that I own because again, I don't own anything fully. But historically, one very specific suit that I have always been fascinated by, and this is not a cool answer or a unique answer. I think most people would be very familiar with this, but King Henry VIII's armor, that it's this darkened armor. It's got like all these pieces to it. The articulation on it is like
the field suit at the Met.
Yeah, it's like space age technology, the way that they like articulated it, and all the gaps are closed out, and there's so much cool detailing in it that every time I've seen just images of it has been outstanding. I think it's gorgeous. Otherwise, my other answer would be like Landsknecht armor, which I guess I don't know if that really counts as armor because they didn't have a lot of pieces, but there's something
they got style.
They're so extra. Like, yeah, I want to wear like mini shorts with slashes and expose my calves and thighs while I wear this big ass breastplate and just be like, yeah, what up? Like I got a Zweihander and mini short with a breastplate. Like I'm down.
Well, Brittany Reeves, Kyle Potts, Spencer Waddell, and Shoshanna Shellans, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you. It's been great to see you again, Brittany. It's been great to see what you've been doing, following
Thank
you online. Just this year, learning about Shoshanna and following her, Spencer and Kyle, learning about yours. Definitely love to get the Wandering Sword Project up here to do something. Um, Thank you for having a great last session for the conference.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We're glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Really cool that you got to put this all together and glad to be a part of it.
Well, thank you.